Nearly 10 years ago in Japan, a video game came out for the Nintendo DS and Game Boy Advance called Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Its effect on society was horrible. Nerds online loved it as the game bred various furries. Truckloads of fan art and fanfiction were posted to the internet about nerds wanting to become Pokemon, and it helped that the storyline of the games pretty much fueled it, like giving code red to a gamer staying up at 1 in the morning. Since then, the game has been re-released several times already with new names, and now with Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, you can play this game yet again. Now, Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon is a dungeon crawling role-playing game where the premise is this. You're a human, most likely living with your parents in your basement and maybe working a McJob, who gets teleported to the Pokemon world and somehow becomes a Pokemon. The quiz makes a return, but you can say screw it and pick whatever Pokemon you want this time around when the quiz is all done with, which is good because now you don't have to keep resetting to get the Pokemon you want. The wide selection of starters is back, and while the game automatically assigns you a partner too, you can change it as well, similar to older titles. Thankfully, Nintendo has been listening to their audience and genders are now gone. Instead, you are now asked if your character is cool or cute. This is good, as it means you will no longer be offended by being called a real biological gender, and you will no longer have to scream at your 3DS to check its privilege. Just like a really bad comedy, the premise results in a lot of the dialogue revolving around, "Hey, you're a Pokemon now! Holy shit! Mom, get the camera!" The game starts you off with a forced tutorial, while many of the older games in the series relied on tutorial pop-ups early on in the game instead. It's like the game thinks you're an Angry Birds gamer, and this is made more frustrating as you cannot skip these tutorials whatsoever. And afterwards, the game also continues to bombard you with several hours of tutorial-like levels, and while you could likely spend those several hours of your life learning a better hobby, the basics of programming, or the Linux command line instead, you're wasting them in this video game. Just like the last few Mystery Dungeon games, the game takes place in yet another boring town. You then end up meeting your partner who you selected earlier, and your partner is always in trouble due to his attempts at imitating those epic hood prank gone wrong videos that he watched on YouTube last week. And then you see an internet slang reference in the game when the game tells you that you can save your game with this pro tip. Your main character in this game goes to school. This is to remind you that you are in fact playing a game intended for kids. The game then nails this fact into your head by continuously bombarding you with the fact that yes, you are a human turned into a Pokemon, and yes, you're a kid trying to be like the grown-ups, and due to this, the writing is extremely cringeworthy, similar to that of a TV show for kids with bad jokes or some message being pushed instead of, a story. You also can't hit a button to skip the long drawn-out cutscenes like many role-playing games, including Square Enix games, allow you to, just to get to the point already. You have to slog through this. It's like watching cartoons with your cousin when you have to babysit them and they want to watch the most cringeworthy thing possible, and then it just drags on and on and on, because after a while you'll be saying, "Get me to the game already." I got to at least level 10, and I was still unable to accept missions freely, and in earlier Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, you could get to this point earlier on in the game, and there's no option to skip this if you've played the last 3 games. You have to go through this tutorial stuff. And the game also tells you when you save at night sometimes to go to sleep. I'm literally not making this up either. This is something that actually happens in this game. It's like this game was designed to be given to a kid by a mom to play in Kroger while they just go and buy groceries while their Nintendo 3DS babysits them. The gameplay is nearly the same exact thing as all the other Mystery Dungeon games ever released. Run through dungeons and attack enemies. Dungeons all look the same, with them consisting of square-shaped areas connected by tubes. Think like your local city's subway system, and it sounds like something you would have played on an Atari XL or PDP-11 back in the 80s. In fact, the core game itself is barely changed since the original Super Nintendo installments in the Mystery Dungeon series that weren't Pokemon related back in the 90s. However, in typical Nintendo fashion, there are new mechanics added for the sake of adding new mechanics. For example, now you can bump into your party members, while in older Mystery Dungeon games you could walk right through them. You can still walk through them, however, if you press the B button to pass through them, which happens to be the run button as well. I have no idea why this bizarre design was made whatsoever. Your health also regenerates every time you move a single square, while older games had to regenerate slower. And your partner also actively tries to seek out a fight and attack for you, even if you're trying to avoid an enemy, while in older games your partner would stick with you. Enemies also use attacks more frequently in this installment compared to older games where they would use an attack once in a while between the regular A button attack. Now, however, you are able to use attacks by pressing the L button instead of opening up the menu, and there's also some stupid gimmick where all 3 party members can use moves at once. Your partner also lets you use items when your health is low or you have a status condition. Why micromanage when the game can hold your hand for you like BioShock Infinite? It also saves a lot more frequently, even after cutscenes, enabling you to go back to writing that escapist fanfiction sooner. Pokemon are also recruited after fulfilling requirements, so instead of hoping for luck that you recruit your favorite gender-neutral waifu, you can just go straight for them. However, your party is now limited to 3 characters at a time, and you can't always use the same Pokemon over and over again in missions. Ouch! If this were an EA or BioWare game, it'd be criticized as a step back. However, it's a Nintendo game, which means it's now a deep hardcore game that's harder than anything by either From Software or Cave. This makes the game feel easier in some areas, while in other areas it will make you feel like smashing your DS with a sledgehammer or unloading your dad's shotgun into it. Then again, much of the gameplay has remained exactly the same, meaning this game adds little new to the series other than some new Pokemon and making core gameplay more frustrating. The game is in 3D, however the game runs at a locked 30 frames per second compared to the 60 frames per second of the DS or Game Boy titles, despite the gameplay being at a similar speed. The graphics are also mediocre, featuring no anti-aliasing and a pretty dull and bland art style. While the DS titles weren't graphically impressive, at least the upper screen would show art during dialogue sequences in many parts of the game, similar to the Game Boy Pokemon remakes. This game, on the other hand, has some pretty bland 3D, and I've actually seen better looking games on the PlayStation Portable. You know, that old system from 2004? Now maybe that's because the 3DS is weak, but I've also seen better looking 3DS games that weren't from Nintendo. They should have gone with 2D and not the retro hipster indie game look that older Mystery Dungeons had in them. The music is some of the dullest and most forgettable shit I've heard in a video game in a while. You'd miss nothing by putting the music on mute and just plugging in your iPod and listening to some good music, because really it's that forgettable. The compositions themselves are forgettable as hell, and the music has some lame sound fonts from freesoundfonts.com added. So it sounds extra boring and generic, like somebody took a MIDI and ran it through a sound font to try to make it sound better, and it's literally elevator music of the same quality as an easy listening cover of a popular song that pops up randomly somewhere. And even if the older Mystery Dungeons didn't have the best music in the universe, it sounded much better than this game's music did, and it was more memorable too. All in all though, my honest opinion of this game is to just avoid this game, because it's just another mediocre entry in a series of mediocrity. I mean, this game is known for getting mediocre Metacritic reviews, but people still eat it up like it's the greatest thing ever. And it's really just a kid's first role-playing game with cringeworthy writing and a story that feels more like an escapist fanfiction and some lonely nerd's mind. You know, the one someone would have after watching a kid's cartoon, playing some Smash, and eating a few Taco Bell items off the dollar menu. It adds really nothing new to the series, and in some ways, it's a step back. If you're a hardcore Pokemon fan who must own anything ever released with the Pokemon logo on it, then definitely buy this game. If you want to run an art blog and fanfiction blog about how kawaii Desu Pokemon are, then buy this game. If you talk about feels towards fictional characters, then buy this game. Otherwise, skip it, and it's not worth your time, especially if you're older than 10. Because to be honest, there are a lot better role-playing games than Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, with better writing, better music, better gameplay. They're better in just about every department than this mediocre game. Trust me, I've played a lot of role-playing games, and I can say that for a fact. And that's all that needs to be said. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more.